About it. We are live. Okay. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. My afternoon, your guys' morning. I'm excited for this one today. What about you, Lee?
Yeah, this is gonna be a good one, especially since we got our guest, Dr. Ramon, with us.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to geeking out with Ramon on
Yeah.
his. He's going to have some good slides, I know. So today we were asked to talk about banana shoes. But by the end of the talk, hopefully we're going to have a new name for it. So, because banana shoes probably not the best description of what it does. So I am going to indulge myself, and I'm going to start off, if everyone's happy with that, by talking about presenting the mechanics and the physics of how it actually works. So if everyone's happy with that, I'm
Yeah.
going to go ahead and
Yeah,
crack
but
on.
before you do, though, if you guys got comments or questions, don't be afraid to put them on there. You can type them in at any time, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. But Yogi's about to lay it down for us right now.
Yeah, and if you, Lee, Ramon, if you want to butt in at any point and ask a question, just do so. This is meant to be. I want to have a little bit of a geek out, but at the same time, I want to still be interactive and what have you. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. Hopefully that works. Can we all see that?
Yep.
Yep.
Perfect. So Lee sent me this photo in the top just before we started, and I thought it was a brilliant image to start with. And for some reason, it's changed my slide slightly, but hopefully we're starting off this talk talking about the banana shoe, but hopefully by the end of it, my new name suggestion is the equilibrium shoe. And we can play around with that name later, but I want to crack on. So I want to use the so-called banana shoe as a bit of a mechanical experiment today. So I want to go through the mechanics of it, and hopefully by the end of it, we're going to see why we should probably change the name to something like the equilibrium shoe. But I want to use it actually, while we're doing this, I want to use it as a demonstration of something deeper, because when you really look at what this shoe does, it actually reveals to us quite a lot about hoof balance itself. And it's not about appearance, it's a matter of mechanics. So it's actually going to show us, in my opinion, it's going to show us some actual principles of what we want to achieve with hoof balance. Because specifically, it reveals that the distal limb is a rotational system that will move toward something called equilibrium, which we'll explain a bit more, when constraints are removed. So what I want to show is that this behavior supports two linked ideas, one that we've talked about before, and something that's going to be in my upcoming textbook as well. And as I go through this talk, if I ever say book, my book, the book, I'm referring to my textbook that's coming up. But first is that the point of balance is not just another proportional landmark. So we talked about the point of balance in our first chat. And the point of balance is actually really important for talking about the banana shoe or the equilibrium shoe. So we're going to talk about the fact that point of balance is not just another proportional landmark, it's an equilibrium condition, okay? And the second is that phalangeal alignment is not merely an imposed ideal, okay? It's an equilibrium state that the limb tends towards when it's allowed to self-organize, okay? So that's the really important point. So hopefully everyone will allow me this indulgence now to geek out on the science of the equilibrium shoe. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. There we go. Right. Now, something I want to make really clear to everyone is that balance is not about specific numbers. It's about creating the definition of balance. And what is balance? If we look at the universe's definition of balance, it's something called equilibrium. Okay, so settling, the universe wants things to settle into the lowest cost state for all the structures involved. Okay, so it wants to settle into a state that is the lowest cost to everyone that's involved in it. It's a law of the universe. But as an industry, we are still obsessed with palm angle, for example. Now, my book argues that balance is about moments, spatial relationships, force resolutions, and not appearance, and certainly not numbers. Now, the equilibrium shoe is what we're going to call it now, is useful because it makes this very visible to us. It strips the problem down to its physics, and it lets us watch the system reveal its own preference. Okay, that's the beauty of the shoe. It lets the system reveal where it wants to be, and actually the universal laws of physics are followed. Now, this is why I think the shoe is so important conceptually, because even if people don't use it in practice for various reasons, which we can talk about later, understanding the physics of it gives us direction, in my opinion, as to what we should try to achieve in practice. Okay, it shows that equilibrium is a condition and not a prescription. And this is discussed in depth in my books, and it's an expansion of the point of balance concept, which we talked about before. What the banana shoe shows is that the limb will self-organize toward that condition, towards a particular condition when it's allowed to. Now, it's funny because I've been told that the horse, being a self-organizing system, therefore shouldn't have a hoof balance dictated to it, and certainly not the hoof balance that we've described. But if you allow the digit to self-organize, it ends up in a certain place, which validates the concept. So let me move on. Don't be afraid to butt in any time, guys. So in our paper and expanded in the book, the point of balance is defined mechanically, not cosmetically. Now, lots of people are getting caught in the trap of thinking the point of balance is simply another single datum point to shoe around. Okay, it's not. This is really important. It's a three-dimensional equilibrium state, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And again, this is what this shoe shows us. Equilibrium being a state where all the soft tissues within the digit are living in their lowest cost state. Okay, remember, that's the rule of the universe, the physics of the universe. That equilibrium means that everything ends up in its lowest cost state relative to the load that's being applied to the hoof. All the moments cancel each other out to create a point of zero moment, and ground reaction forces are evenly distributed. Okay, that's the definition of hoof balance. So at mid-stance, equilibrium at the distal interphalangeal joint is achieved, okay, when this is the point of balance concept, when the line of action of the ground reaction force, so if you look at the top left, the line of action of the ground reaction force goes through the centroid of the solar surface and is in line with the weight transference of the horse. Okay, that's how you create equilibrium, because that is what zeros the turning force acting on the hoof. Okay, so the point of balance is not just a place on the sole. It's the condition under which all of these forces and vectors line up with each other and balance efficiently around the joint. And this is important because it immediately moves us away from a crude two-dimensional proportional thinking. Okay, so people think just about base proportions, but you can only get all three of these lined up if you have phalangeal alignment, and this is what the equilibrium shoe actually shows us, right? So let's move on to this, right? So let me just explain why this is the case. So lining up the centroid of the base of your shoe with the point of balance is relatively simple, right? So if we look on the left, we can see we've got 50-50 proportions, And if you look at the X-ray, we've lined up the middle of the shoe with the point of balance. But we haven't lined up the action point, the action force, the ground reaction force action point with those three. So although we've created two-dimensional proportions around the point of balance, we haven't created the point of balance concept, because the point of balance concept has to line up all three of these, right? So this is the point, right? And we know from studies that the center of pressure moves dorsally with hoof growth, and the more broken back the phalangeal alignment is, the more dorsal the center of pressure is to the POB and to the PPSH, the centroid of the surface of the solar surface. Okay, so in the when I say three-dimensional spatial balance, it's not a two-dimensional lining up the middle of the base with the point of balance. It's about lining up all three of these points. Okay, and this is also why people talk about creating 50-50 around center of rotation being impractical, this, that, and the other, because it's a three-dimensional problem. It's not a two-dimensional problem, right? But if we look on the right-hand side, we can see that when we have a phalangeal alignment and when the foot settles into a state of equilibrium, that state of equilibrium is the state at which we have three-dimensional spatial balance. So we have the center of the surface and the point of balance lined up, as we do on the left-hand side, but we also have the ground reaction force acting through that point as well. So this is the point, right? It's a three-dimensional spatial problem, not simply two dimensions. Right, okay, so I'll teach a little bit of physics now, right? So to understand a shoe, we need to understand some basic rotational physics, okay? Bear with me, guys. This is me geeking out, right? So basic rotational physics comes down to force, lever arms, moment or torque, the center of rotation, a net moment, and equilibrium, okay? So let me strip this down to the general physics, right? Anytime a force acts at a distance from a pivot, okay, so in the middle here we have a pivot, and here we have two different objects away from that pivot with a red force acting on them. When you have a force acting on an object around a pivot, it creates a rotation, okay? The bigger the force or the bigger the lever arm, the bigger the moment, the bigger the turning force. Now, if the moment acting clockwise and anti-clockwise do not cancel each other out, then the system rotates, right? This is basic physics, right? So in distal, if they do cancel each other out, like they do in this photo, okay, so the rotational force in one way is cancelled out by a rotational force in the other way, then you end up with zero moment and nothing moves, right? This is the end point of the banana shoe, okay? You have zero moment, okay? So in distal limb terms, the center of rotation is the pivot. So the center of rotation is this pivot point in the middle. The ground reaction force is one major external rotational force. And the internal tendons and ligaments are the opposing rotational force. And the hoof keeps moving until those two forces are cancelling each other out, right? That creates zero moment. So let's look at this now applied to the shoe, okay? So now we come to the shoe itself. So the book describes the banana shoe, which we're going to rename the equilibrium shoe. Hopefully everyone will agree with that. As one of the clearest actually ways of demonstrating the point of balance framework. Okay, so when the belly of the shoe is positioned beneath the center of rotation, the hoof consistently rotates cranially under load, increasing the palmar angle. Okay, that happens almost every time. Importantly, the shoe is mechanically passive. It doesn't force anything to move. What it does is it removes geometric resistance and places the digit into a deliberately non-equilibrium state. Okay, that's the key. The shoe is not the mover, the limb is the mover. The shoe simply allows the mechanical truth to reveal itself. Okay, so we're in the point of balance framework. Equilibrium at mid-stance exists only when the internal flexor moments, okay, so the rotational demand created by the flexors, and the opposing ground reaction force, okay, so the flexor moment is the yellow arrow, the ground reaction force moment is the blue arrow, okay. When those two equal each other, then you have a point of zero moment, okay. So when the belly of the shoe is placed underneath the center of rotation, the ground reaction force is applied at a location where the internal moment system can't balance. Okay, so the moment arm is mechanically costly at that point. Okay, so remember, everything wants to settle into its lowest cost. In that configuration, equilibrium is impossible. So the system does, according to the laws of physics, it rotates cranially to end up at the lowest cost state, where the torques, the moments in each direction, equal each other out. Okay, so as it rotates, the effective lever arm shortens, joint torque reduces in that direction, the internal mechanical cost reduces, and the rotation continues until equilibrium state is satisfied. Okay, then the motion stops. So the final position is not chosen by the shoe, it's selected by the limb. And the limb wants to settle into whatever costs everything the lowest amount of energy, right? So that all of a sudden you're starting to hear some therapeutic uses there, right? Because it's creating the lowest cost state of the digit. Okay, so now we get to the part which I think is really beautiful as a hoof and science geek, because for me, this understanding explains why certain hoof balance suggestions become apparently validated, because systems under load want to settle into configurations that reduce internal cost. Okay, so in this case, when the hoof rotates from the non-equilibrium state created by the shoe, it is basically shortening the need for excessive internal counter moments. Okay, so the limb's not moving randomly, it's moving towards a mechanically cheaper solution. Okay, mechanically cheaper for all of its internal structures, right? So all of the structures within the digit have a lower cost environment. They're working less hard. They're in their easy state, if you like. So this is what I mean here by energy minimization through moment equilibrium. Okay. And this is exactly why, for me, that final position actually matters so much, because if they all end up in the same position, it tells us something about hoof balance. Okay, because it's the position the limb itself selects when it's allowed to seek the most mechanically cheap state. And what is that state, right? That state is phalangeal alignment and free and equilibrium according to the to the point of balance framework, right? So it's validating our notions of correct hoof balance because it's settling into the lowest system state. So the banana shoe, the equilibrium shoe, is actually quantifying hoof balance by allowing the digit to organize itself and tell us what its most efficient state is. So I think that's actually something really powerful for the industry to understand. So I could go into some more physics here, but I want to just quickly explain the lowest state, the lowest energy state. Okay, it's a simple way to picture this is a ball in a bowl. Okay, the banana shoe. So, everyone can imagine what happens to this. You drop you drop the marble in the bowl, and it's always going to settle into the lowest energy state. Okay, which is at the bottom of the bowl, right? Now, the banana shoe creates the equivalent of this situation in rotational form in the digit. Okay, it places the loaded digit in a state where it can choose this lowest state. Okay, so that's why I think we should rename the banana shoe as the equilibrium shoe. Now, we can draw several conclusions. You might have already got the conclusions from what I've said, but first of all, it shows that balance around the center of rotation, which is very often stated as the ideal, is not by itself an equilibrium condition. Okay, the center of rotation is an anatomical reference that the moments act around. It's not the solution of itself. Okay. Second, it confirms that the point of balance is not a point to be chased visually in 2 dimensions on the solar surface. It's a condition that must be satisfied in 3 dimensions. Okay. Third, it shows that when constraints are removed, the limb will seek the mechanically efficient solution on its own. Okay, this is why I see the banana shoe, the equilibrium shoe, as a validation device for our suggestions of ideal hoof balance. Okay, because it exposes the truth of the mechanical system, and that the digit obeys the laws of physics, and that functional anatomy prefers the lowest cost energy state, as well as, you know, anything else in physics. Okay, so what does the equilibrium shoe tell us? Okay, it tells us that we have to create that 3-dimensional spatial balance, and that phalangeal alignment, as much as many people would like to argue, is not merely a cosmetic ideal. It is the equilibrium state that the limb tends towards when it's allowed to self-organize, right? So
Yogi, I wanted to chip in on something.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Just because if you keep going, then I'm gonna have to leave because you won't leave me anything else to say.
Oh yeah, okay, go.
No. I'm just kidding. I just want to say to complement this that you're saying, that something that I find out regularly putting things into practice, because I use the banana or the rocker shoe a lot or the equilibrium shoe a lot, is that not if I'm able to place the shoe correctly, all of my cases will end up with a pretty straight hoof pastern axis.
Yeah.
Every single time. There's never one time where I put my banana or my rocker or my equilibrium shoe correctly, where I get a broken back hoof pastern axis. If that is the case, there's something that it's not right. So this has become an amazing tool for me, because I can get alignment in many of my cases that need it, and what I get in response is 6 weeks from now I get a much more uniform sole growth, hoof mass, and that helps me improve these horses. So I do agree with this idea of the rocker shoe, of this concept to be actually seeking for this equilibrium. You know, not voluntarily, but almost obligated. You know, that's it's physics working. But I'll go into it a little bit more when you give me a chance.
Yeah. But I think that says it all, you know, that the point is when the digit is allowed to self-organize, which is what the banana shoe allows it to do, that is the state that it chooses to be in. And if that's the lowest cost energy state, then that helps us to understand why it has such therapeutic advantages, because everything is in its optimal lowest energy cost state. So it's I think it's a powerful lesson for us. Now, I just want to go slightly off of banana shoes because we're talking about mechanics. Okay. Now, these explanations hopefully help people to understand why the shoe is so therapeutically good, as I said, because it allows the digit to find its own equilibrium state. But I want to quickly visit another aspect as well, because we could talk about this for ages as well, but I also want to talk about how the shoe mirrors the forces and necessary mechanics of the whole stance phase. Okay, so we were looking at it in terms of statics, but also if you look at the way that you have the heels that can roll in and then you can have the breakover that rolls out, it's mirroring the stance phase, isn't it, as well? And I like to use, this is something that I learned about doing my degree. I know it's something that Dr. Caldwell talks about as well. And this is the timeline shoe. So here's my application of a timeline shoe. And basically what the timeline shoe is it's a banana shoe, but with a flat midsection. Okay, so
Yeah.
you have a rolled toe and you have a rolled heel, but you have a flat midsection. And I use this a lot in my performance horses because I want. So what it does, let's talk about what it does. So when you have first impact, the heels are allowed to roll into the stance, which reduces the initial impact forces, and often allows hemodynamic function better as well, because you can have that frog closer to the ground by having that not so much heel height. So that's part of the shoe, as you can see in this diagram. Addresses the first impact phase. So you have 5% of the shoe is like a reverse angle, so like a banana that way. The midsection is flat. And for me, when you're having high level performance horses working at speed, I like to have that flat midsection for stability during peak load, because they're not just moving in a straight line, they have lateral movement and all these kind of things as well. So for me, banana shoe is absolutely brilliant for therapeutic cases when you want to build mass and you're dealing with laminitis and you're dealing with really thin soles and those kind of things. But the mechanics of it can be applied slightly different in this timeline shoe, to have that flat midsection to allow for stability, and also you can have that raised and wedged so that you have the alignment during mid stance. And then you have the rolled toe at breakover. So it's like a banana shoe, but with a flat midsection.
Yeah.
And I use this a lot in practice. And I also use a lot of what I call mini banana shoes. So here's a mini banana shoe. And again, I find this is what we can talk about this now between us. I get a little bit worried about having really large banana shoes on horses that are performing fast work. That's something we can discuss. So I tend to go for the mechanics, but on a more subtle level. So here's a horse. You can see this particular horse, when it was working fast, it was really jamming its heels into the floor, and it was creating this quarter crack here. So what I did was I put this mini banana shoe. You can see the back of the shoe is air wedged like the banana. And it just allowed the horse to roll into that stance instead of crashing his heels into the ground. So again, it's talking about the banana shoe is not just useful for static balance, but it becomes very useful when you're wanting to address the rest of the stance phase. So let's open that up for discussion. I've done my physics bit. Let's open that up to discussion, and then we can move on to Ramon and Lee sharing their stuff. So anyone got any questions on all of that, or anyone want to add to any of that?
We do have a good question from Levi, but you go ahead, Ramon.
No, well, if you wanna go ahead and go with a question, and then maybe Yogi gives me a chance to continue, because I think it's like, actually, like, Yogi and I got together beforehand to do this presentation. We didn't, but it's gonna seem like it, because I will it will be very much in line with what he said from my point of view. So maybe we can do that first and then go over the questions.
Yeah, I don't mind.
All right.
I don't mind.
Sure.
Or did you want to jump in, Lee? Do you want to?
I would just say this is just a wonderful presentation right there on physics that are involved The one thing that I would say just historically is that you really need to know how to apply these, or you can hurt horses as well as help them. So anything that can be twice as good can be twice as bad if you apply it wrong. So
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
I'll go into that, Lee.
okay, and then the other thing that I would say is that's a wonderful application if they need it, but on performance horses like we work a lot on, I don't I don't think it applies as well. But I do think that the mild rocker that you're talking about, their baby rocker or whatever you call it, we do a lot of that. Like we
Yeah.
salad bowl a little bit, nearly every front foot. And the whole point is gaining depth and shortening the toe, but fitting the toe. So a little rocker toe and a
Shall I
salad
show
bowl.
some of your? Here you go. There's one of yours.
Yeah, there you go. So I think that's just that horse wants to be long and low and flat, and how we manage him is just a solid bowl and with a slight rocker on that foot. So it's nothing crazy, but you can see the differences between applications.
one?
Really helps.
Is that the same horse, Lee? That one there?
That is the same horse. It's just two different. Um, I feel like I did a lot better job on the right than I did on the left. Although I think they're both good, it just shows that adding mechanics a little bit more of a rocker toe on the front, which that's not a banana. But my point is that it's lower mechanics. And this horse, go to the next one real quick, and then Ramon can dive in. So this horse on the far right, sorry, it's kind of out of order. That's all the same horse. So these are hind feet. That is a negative plantar angle, and that was pretty intense, right? And there are different versions of rockers that we put on there. The top left is a legitimate rocker like yours was, Yogi, and then the bottom left is one like Ramon did with the rocker pad with the mechanics put in the shoe. And then the bottom right one, I think, was my best application, especially if you look at phalangeal alignment and plantar angle. My take home is, we can talk about this later. I'm wrapping up. The take home is the mechanics needed on the front are very different from the hind, and we can talk about that at the end. I'm done.
Okay, cool.
Good.
Cool. Shall I add your slides up, Ramon? Shall
Yeah.
I go? Okay,
Yeah.
man. You got to tell me when you want me to move.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, what I always try to explain when I go about this concept is, first of all, define what is a rocker shoe. And a rocker shoe is obviously a shoe that is not flat, but that it has a uniform curvature on it, a radius curvature, maybe we can say convex shape, where the support surface should be located close to the center of the foot. Sometimes we call that the belly of the foot, which is the part of the foot that is of the shoe that is going to be in touch with the ground. And that's really important because that's what we need to apply right underneath the center of rotation. So we can go to next, Yogi, please. So usually when we talk about the rocker shoe, we refer to many times to the effect of the shoe as mechanics. So you can have low level mechanics that is like what Yogi was telling, like a baby banana or something. I like to call it low level mechanics, and it's basically just very subtle curvature. Or sometimes there are many commercial shoes like Nandrick from Dr. Redden, or like the Contenders from Dr. Pittman, that you can buy a shoe that is flat on the foot surface, but it has this radius curvature on the solar surface. So you don't need to incorporate the mechanics into your trim, because the shoe will have some mechanics, but that would also mean that you have lower level mechanics. I have experienced that lower level mechanics go really well with some sport horses. I shoe a lot of dressage horses. I don't shoe a lot of show jumpers, but I shoe dressage and I shoe quarter horses. And many times having them with very low level mechanics, or this goes a little bit hand in hand with what Yogi was saying, that he's rockering a bit of the toe and a bit of the heels. Someone that does that very often with good success is Dr. Hans Castellin's from Europe. He likes that approach. So when I talk about using rocker shoes on maybe a performance horse, I am of course talking about low level mechanics. We can go to the next, Yogi, please.
Just before we do that, let's get a couple of questions done so we
Yeah,
don't lose them down too far.
yeah,
So, um, so somebody's asking about medial lateral balance for equilibrium shoes. Maybe we can talk about that at the end because that'll take
yeah.
us slightly. But the so does the rocker concept also work with composite shoes? Have either of you ever done it with composite shoes?
I haven't done it with composite shoes. I don't really use it, but use those very often. But I do think that you could do it pretty easily by just grinding it into your composite shoes. But it
Yeah,
would be
exactly. You could definitely achieve the low level mechanics that Ramon's talking
Yeah,
about with the composite shoes just by grinding them in there. So, yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
I
Um,
agree.
and then Brad Menard said, on my journey of more weight bearing equals more circulation and more growth, I felt like alignment via wedges helped me initially. Horses in the beginning seem to really appreciate being alignment. However, some would have adverse effects upper limb after a period of time. The change for me was how to shoe the low horse and gradually bring them closer to alignment for preventative maintenance. Is there a question there, Brad?
I like Cash's question while Brad's getting back to us. Cash said that I like the Eventer. Fit and beveled, especially at the heel on the fronts, and get a great comfort response. That's actually my go-to shoe on the front feet just because they're a little wider and they got a rolled edge all the way around the shoe. So what do you guys like to use for a shoe when you're gonna just take a steel shoe and rocker it?
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends what horse I'm. For the polo guys, I tend to. I'll use a thicker section, and then I'll just put the mechanics in low level mechanics into the shoe, and tend to stay with a flat foot surface. If I'm doing more, so if I go, the one I did before was I don't really have a preference. I kind of just use whatever shoe I was going to use and just build the mechanics into it. And it's pretty easy to put those mechanics into most shoes.
What about you, Ramon?
Well, I am because of the environment. I mean, I can't be. I don't have a lot of options to what to use. I would love to buy Nanrix or I would love to buy other shoes, but I normally can't. Because my clients won't pay for them most of the time. So I'm forced to use regular flat steel keg shoes that I rocker myself, and I give the level of rocker that the case requires depending on what I'm dealing with. Can you do the next slide?
Yeah, of course, sure,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what I this is gonna sort of explain that as well. When we talk about high level mechanics, we mean about much more aggressive rocker shape. So that is used more in therapeutic cases than in just a regular horse that is performing actually. So when people ask me, are you concerned or on horses going high speed in a high level mechanic shoe, my answer is, of course I'm concerned. I'm never going to put a high level mechanic shoe for a horse to go at high speed or to perform. This is a package for therapeutic purposes. And there's shoes like also like what we're talking about. They have the bevel in the toe and the wedge in the heels. So you can apply with just a little bit of shaping of the shoe, quite high level mechanics that are helped by the shoe itself. What I do normally is that if I want to increase my PA or increase my mechanics, is that I give more rocker shape to the regular flat shoe and I use wedge pads. The wedge pads give me support in the back part of the foot, and they also help me kick up the PA even higher, like in laminitic cases where I really need them. Can we go to the next slide, please,
Yep.
Yogi?
You also have a question for you, Ramon, when you get it.
Yeah, I just want to finish these ideas because I might answer them along the way. So what do the rocker shoe do mechanically? They, of course, reduce the effective forward lever arm, and they lower the required flexor torque. Basically, what Yogi was saying, or something that I like to call, is flexor demand. The flexor demand is the amount of strength or effort that the DDFT needs to do to seek alignment. So that goes hand in hand with what Yogi was telling. Give me the next slide to see if it's the one yeah, this one. So this is interesting, and goes hand in hand with what Yogi was saying. For many years, the function of the banana shoe was described as um, a self-adjusting palmar angle shoe. There's even a name called sapas, and it sort of implies that the horse voluntarily was moving forward, or creating tension in their deep digital flexor muscle to contract their deep digital flexor tendon to rotate their limb forward, seeking for alignment. And I've always had some issues with that because it seemed not very scientific explanation. And basically, after all that we've talked to Yogi, you have helped me understand the physics explanation of it. It's not that the horse is voluntarily doing it, but the physics of the way the foot works is forcing the system to move. If you see the picture in the bottom right corner, we have like this normal pulley or wheel, where let's think that the cord in the right is the deep digital flexor tendon, which is opposed by the cord in the left, which is the the
Ground
the,
reaction.
the suspensory apparatus of the distal phalanx, governed by the ground reaction force. Okay, so like Yogi said, because the forces, because the joint is gonna work as this kind of pulley, and the forces are acting at a distance from this pivot, they're creating what we know as torque, correct? Which is like a rotational effect. So when you put a flat shoe, if you think of the deep digital of the distal interphalangeal joint as this kind of pulley, and then you put a flat shoe, it's gonna lock the ability to adapt to whatever your trim and your shoe position is. So if you leave a low foot, with, let's say, a low palmar angle, and and you put a flat shoe, then that shoe is not going to move. So the capacity to adapt is going to be locked. But if you put a rocker shoe, which is like this wheel, there is going to be no resistance for rotation to occur. So like Yogi said, the limb is going to always search for a low cost environment. I like how you placed it. So if we have a very a higher flexor demand, that is gonna, without the resistance from the shape of the shoe, that is going to allow the foot to roll forward, to where the brake, which in this case is going to be the extensor moment, wants it to be. So it is looking for that concept of balance, for that equilibrium point, because of how it is physically adapted or placed. So basically it's an idea of moment arms, moment arms and equilibrium around the center of rotation, and what the rocker shoe is allowing through lack of resistance to the system to look for this position.
Exactly.
Can we see the next one, please? So just to bring a little bit of the practical part into it, what we try to do when we trim the mechanics into the foot, especially if we have high heels, if like treating a club foot or a laminitic foot, is we try to rocker the heels back from the widest part of the foot to the widest part of the frog without compromising a lot of the hoof mass in the center of the foot, which is many times what happens if you like, if you want to bring that it's that the foot to the widest part of the frog by trimming it flat, then you're gonna have to remove all that mass, and you will end up with a flat foot and a low palmar angle. The trim for the rocker shoe allows you to maintain that mass under the widest part of the foot and to trim the heels back to look for the rocker. What you want to do in this case, and we'll see it in a little bit later, you're going to try to match the palmar rim of the coffin bone to where your capsular palmar angle is going to be, and that's going to improve the weight distribution on the sole. If you have a low foot, then you will have to concentrate your trim on your toe, and probably you're going to have to use a bigger wedge pad as well. But also remember that in a low foot, there is a secondary increased flexor demand because the flexor tendons are under stress because the palmar angle is low and there is more tension on the flexor side. So even in a flat foot, when you remove the resistance by the shape of the shoe, the flexor moment is also going to try to activate itself to reduce the extensor moment into our equilibrium concept, right? So let's go to the next one.
Just quickly, because what you said there just answers two of the questions. So
Yeah.
Camilla is asking about an Iberian horse with very high heels. She's asking if would this be something for that. So this trim here would be, this concept would be perfect for that kind of situation.
Yeah, and you know what? I shoe a couple of dressage mares that are Spanish, Iberian, and they do have this conformation of like high heels, which is interesting because their palmar angle is not that high, but they do have like contracted high heels, and they love, like, really, I've had some cases. I had a case of a mare that she was constantly being injected in her navicular bursa for her to perform, and the owners were about to go crazy. And we did a low level mechanic shoe where we were able, like you said, to bring those heels back so that now there's a smooth landing, and now there's a much more efficient breakover process. And this mare is doing moderate dressage without having ever to get another injection in her bursa, just because of the mechanics of the shoe. So it is worth in cases like that.
Yeah. And also someone's asking about long toe, low heel, flat feet, and the mechanics are useful in both cases, right? Because
Yes.
in the flat foot, it allows that DDFT tension to be relieved.
Yeah.
It increases blood flow, and then the foot lays down mass. I don't know whether you're going to talk about that or not, but so the mechanics are useful in both cases, in the high
Yeah.
heel and in the low heel.
Right. That's correct. You can go to the next. Okay. So when we're applying the mechanics on the shoe, we need to do it uniform. It needs to be a uniform bend, because if you have like a flat or a bend in the middle and then flat in the front and flat in the back with growth, it can sit flat in one of these surfaces, and then you will remove the idea or the functioning of the mechanic. So it's important for the shape to be uniform, but something from the curvature shape to be uniform. But something I have learned through practice, and also a friend of mine helped me out figuring this out, because I'm putting flat keg shoes into rockers, so they don't have this shape, like the Nanbrick rockers. they have a shape that makes things a lot easier. Or the contenders, these guys were thinking about how to give the shape of the shoe so that it will facilitate your ability to place these mechanics, even if it's flat. But even if you want to give it a little more mechanics, then you get beautiful medium level mechanics with just a little bit in one of these shoes. But when I'm working with a flat shoe, then it's more complicated. And something I have learned is that you need to taper your rocker a little bit from the heels towards the toe. So that is going to help in the end of your cycle to your shoe staying in the right place. If you have a very strong rocker toe compared to your maybe heel a rocker, then you're gonna have more chance with growth, especially in these low feet that tend to grow migrated forward. You're gonna have more of a chance of something going wrong, and by the end of your cycle, these shoes rocking back. Because the success of these shoes is not what you get on the first day. The success on these shoes, if you come 6 weeks later and your foot is still in alignment and in position.
Yeah.
That's why for me it's important, and especially in the low foot, that's where I have some problems with a part of the centroid surface of the hoof capsule as being part of the equation, because especially when I have migrated forward feet, one thing that I have to do to have success in my application is forget about the hoof capsule. It's really important. Every time I forget that I need to forget about the capsule in this feet, I shoe more concentrating on my hoof capsule instead of the bony column itself. Then I put my shoe in there, put 2 nails, take a radiograph, and it's not good. Many times I have to bring this shoe back, and many times my toe is gonna stick out a little bit, because if you want to have success, you need to shoe the bony column and not the hoof capsule. And sometimes in this migrated feet, it's really important because they're at a completely different place. Especially like in Costa Rica, our feed is corn based. So I'm completely convinced that many of our horses have subclinical equine metabolic syndrome derived laminitic cases where there's stretching of the cytoskeleton of the basal membrane of the lamellary interface. So this stretching makes hoof capsule distortion towards forward migration much worse. So I'm dealing with this all the time. So something I've learned is that, and I'm going to show you in the next slide. Can you go ahead quickly, please?
That's a really important point, because the moment forces happen around the center of rotation. They don't happen around the base of the foot. So
Yep.
you have to shoe the mechanical pivot point, not the best. So yeah, that's exactly right, and that's why
Exactly.
the position of the belly, as soon as it moves out of that mechanical point, then, and this is what Lee was saying earlier, if you fit them wrong, and you can start making things roll the wrong way because you haven't created the correct physical state for the shoe to work correctly.
Exactly. Okay, so when we put a rocker shoe, this is basically what we want. We want our center of rotation, or our belly of the shoe, to be underneath the center of rotation. We want our curvature to be as uniform as possible, but maybe tapered down a little bit from the heels towards the toe. You want to use wedge pads, especially in low feet, because you want support in that back part of the hoof. And sometimes you're going to want to kick up that PA even further, especially in a laminate case like this one. You need your shoe to be quite long on the back. I don't mean long, but long enough. Like if you're deciding between a 0 and a 1 and you want to place a rocker, then you should use the 1. That's what I mean. Because many times being short in your heels with a rocker shoe is gonna make things wrong towards the end of the shoeing cycle. And of course, if you do this right and you have the belly underneath the center of rotation, the next point of contact, or the final point of contact, is going to be located very close to the tip of P3. So that is going to leave us like a zero breakover distance, removing all leverage from the toe, and creating this more favorable biomechanical state where things start to work better, where perfusion has no counter pressure that is going to affect it. And let's go to the next one, Yogi. Okay, so what we want to avoid, it's precisely this: having our belly way too far forward, because if we do that, and I have these examples, it's funny and sad, but in Costa Rica, many vets don't pay attention to the complexity of this, and they tell a farrier, go put a rocker, and maybe the farrier, he doesn't pay attention to the complexity of this, and then he goes and puts the shape of a banana. That's why I don't like banana very much. He puts the shape of a banana and puts it on the shoe, and then you get this, and what you're doing is you're creating a lot of stress, much more stress on the joints, much more strain on a DDFT, and this horse became even more lame after this application. So you really want to avoid having your rocker too far forward, or like in this case, like I was telling you, or forcing your rocker to weigh your rocker toe, or the toe of the rocker shoe, way too much. It can create this scenario.
This is exactly what I was showing earlier, because it's not a two-dimensional concept. It's a three-dimensional concept, right? Three-dimensional spatial balance. So
Yeah.
here you have the ground reaction forces acting way cranial of the point of balance.
Yeah.
So that's not the concept. The mechanics don't work there. So you have to have all three of those points, the two vectors and the solar datum point, all have to be in alignment for the mechanics to work correctly.
Right.
So that's a really, really important point.
Yeah. So this is a case example, and this is actually nice because I did this one yesterday. So it's something that I'm doing every day. This is a mare that she has a bit of a high-low syndrome, where the right front foot is clubby and the left front foot it's kind of normal. You know how when you have high-low, sometimes you have the high foot closer to club foot and the low foot being more closer to normal, and sometimes you have the high foot being normal and the low foot being very flat. But this mare, she's a little bit fat, tendency towards gaining weight, and she had an aggressive bout of laminitis maybe about a year ago, and she she foundered even more on the right front because that's her club foot. There's an increased flexor demand before the laminitis, and I have managed her with these rocker shoes because it helps her grow quite nice foot all the time. But what I wanted to show you is, if you see the foot on the right side, I mean on the left side, which is the right front, that foot, because it's a little bit more of a club foot, has a higher flexor demand, and it always tends to roll a little bit forward towards the toe. And I want to, this is normal in high flexor demand feet. If you see the other one, our left front, it kind of stays a little bit more closer to the center of rotation, and not towards the toe. And that's because that's where that foot found its equilibrium. It doesn't need to roll aggressively to look for that less cost state. But when we have higher flexor demand, then they tend to roll forward. And many people say that is shifting the load towards the toe, but we know that that's not the case. And actually, there's been studies where you can see how the center of pressure is actually moving back in this case towards the more stronger structures that we want to load, which is our goal. basically, and the fact that the shoe has, like we said, no resistance because of its shape allows physics to do what it needs to do and to find this moment equilibrium between the flexor and extensor to a place where it's comfortable. And this mare does great. She works a little bit. She's a show paso mare, and she works with these little rockers, and we never have any problem with her setup like this.
Perfect. We've got a question here.
Yeah.
When you trim the heel mechanics, what is your reference for medial lateral balance? Would you trim more heel than you'd normally trim when fitting a flat shoe?
Yes. Well, medial lateral balance, I don't manage any different concerning medial lateral balance with a rocker shoe than I do with a flat shoe. I'm a little bit spoiled because I have an x-ray machine with me all the time, so I can check when I have some doubts if the conformation is a little bit off, or there's distortion, or there's not uniform growth patterns. But yeah, one reference that I try to use when we trim the heels is radiographic guidance, trying to match my heels with my palmar rim of the coffin bone. So we would have to go into a little bit of differentiating what is a capsular palmar angle versus a ground palmar angle. Because when you have a flat foot, you can have when you have a flat foot without a wedge, just a flat foot in the ground, you will have the same capsular palmar angle. It's going to be the same as your ground palmar angle. But let's say you trim those heels back hard, and then you put a wedge pad to compensate what you trimmed. Then in that case, you will have a smaller capsular palmar angle, but a higher ground palmar angle. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, in the rocker shoe, that's what the rocker shoe allows you to happen. You can derotate this laminitic feet by trimming the heels aggressively, but then because of the shape of the shoe and the wedge that you want to use, you can still maintain your positive or initial palmar angle so that you don't create more pulling forces on the DDFT, but you're also derotating P3, and you're allowing for a more uniform load distribution throughout the sole, and that is going to allow as well for better perfusion, and that's when you start to see these feet responding and growing.
Definitely. Lee, let's bring you in on this question. The three of us can answer this question. So somebody's asking about therapeutic cases and pathological cases on performance horses. When do we decide to go towards rocker shoe versus other therapeutic interventions? When do we decide to go down the rocker shoe route?
I think for me, it's just very case dependent, like what does the horse need? I think that with rocker shoes, knowing how to apply them is a big difference, because if you know how to apply them, you can stick them on all kinds of stuff. But I guess historically, like Dr. Sammy Pittman makes some great shoes, the contender shoes that Ramon was talking about, and the Nanrick ones. If you need a true rocker and you're not that good at putting them on, they're really handy. And even if you're good at putting them on, they make your life easier. So
You bet.
to answer the question, if it's a laminitic situation, if it is a even chronic or whatever whatever phase that you're in, then I would be leaning towards a real rocker. Where if you have, just like my negative plantar angle I showed, if it is an extreme broken back axis, then yeah, I would be reaching for that. But the biggest thing that I've learned through it is the trim underneath it is as important or more important than what you're putting on top of it. So I'd put a bigger emphasis on what does that horse need. Is it a performance horse? If it's a performance horse, I wouldn't want to put it in a big rocker shoe because they still have to function correctly.
Agree.
Yeah. Ramon, what about you? When do you decide to go down the rocker route rather than using other methods?
Well, just like Lee said, because I'm used to this system and it worked so well for me. I tend to use low level mechanics a lot. It seems like every time I trim a foot, it ends up with some kind of rocker shape on it. I like to use what Dr. Sammy Pittman calls like the biplanar trim, where you don't exactly have to trim your heels like you trim your toe. And you can differentiate that a little bit. So many times, if I have a low foot, and I want to improve the palmar angle, then I'm trimming that foot in a little bit different plane that I'm trimming those heels. And in the other way around, I do it even more when I have upright or club feet. The rocker shoes help a lot, because you can bring those heels back, redistribute the weight on the solar surface, and improve the overall hoof growth of those feet. So I find myself using it very often and in different cases, especially in laminatics, because you can really be aggressive with your mechanics, and in my experience, that helps a lot to stimulate the growth of good hoof mass and bring these feet back to a more natural state. And I start winning them off of the high mechanics into very low mechanics. And many times, if I keep them, I keep them in really low mechanics, and that works for me. But I'm also a veterinarian. I'm not a regular shoer that shoes a ton of horses that are performing like you guys. So my go-to is very many times going to try to help the feet I'm working on with a little bit of mechanics somehow.
Yeah, I mean, I use mini banana shoes a lot. I call them mini banana shoes, just because, as like I was talking about earlier, when I have these high level performance horses, and as Lee was saying, you can't. If you're performing, then you have to be a little bit cautious of using these high level mechanics.
For sure.
So I tend to, I don't do a lot of high level mechanics, but that's purely because I don't shoe a lot of laminetics and those kind of things that would require it. That was difficult to say. But I do use a lot of mini bananas just to build those mechanics in, get that the stance phases looked after. What we're talking about earlier. I use a lot of the timeline shoes, which is a similar mechanical situation without the rocker as per se. But so yeah, I certainly use them, and I certainly would use them again. I use them a lot in club feet, just because. And this actually, you half answered a question here, and we can answer this question together actually, as to why we use them on these club feet. Because somebody's asking, why are we cutting back the heel to then reapply a wedge? So let's answer that question a little bit for people so they can understand why we're using it in these club feet.
I think the first question that you need to ask yourself, Nancy, and everybody else that's thinking that, is, what angle is the heel growing at? Would you guys agree to that? That's the whole take home.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well, the way,
go on.
yeah, the way I see it is like, I wish I could draw for you guys, but if you have a club foot that it's flat, and they say it's at the end of the cycle, you're gonna have a very big distance from the heels or from the wings of the coffin bone to the ground surface, and a very short distance from the apex of the coffin bone to the ground surface. So that is creating an uneven load distribution that creates this vicious cycle where a lot more blood is going to go into our heels, and a lot less blood is going to go into the toe. So when you remove that heel, you are in the capsule, in the hoof capsule, you are reestablishing a more uniform load distribution. You're gonna reduce the distance from the heel to the posterior area of P3, and that sometimes we call it derotation, we're actually derotating P3. But then you have to add them back because the principle of the club foot is the increased musculotendinous strain originated from the deep digital flexor muscle, which is pulling that P3 downwards and creating this whole condition. So in my friend, that is the reason why in my head, that is the reason why you need to reduce the heel height to create better load distribution, but you need to compensate it because you don't want to put that foot back to the ground and create an even stronger pull of the DDFT. And sometimes, like, these horses won't even walk because they can't put their heel down, that is the reason why it has to work this way, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I need to jump in here for the practical people in the crowd. Ramon, that was awesome. I think, simply put, would you agree that by cutting the heels off and ultimately wedging them back up, you increase the base, in short?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
you provide blood flow to the back half of the foot.
Yeah.
So it comes back to what Ramon was saying about the difference between the capsular palmar angle and the ground palmar angle. Okay. So you're derotating the distal phalanx within the hoof capsule, or in relation to the center of rotation. You're doing that. You're also redistributing ground reaction forces. Okay, so when you have the club foot, we talked about the proportions around the point of balance, and about if you shoe around center of rotation, technically you have increased ground reaction forces at the toe, right?
Yeah.
It's the same in a club foot. In a club foot, because you have less base, you have less heel length, you have a concentration of ground reaction forces, so it's redistributing those as well. But also, the other thing that we haven't mentioned is frog contact as well, because in these club feet, where their frog is so far up deep inside the heels, if we want to re-engage that frog and re-engage that hemodynamic system, that's another reason for trimming the heels down, as well as what you just said, Lee, about increasing the length of the base. We want to get that frog working again as well, to increase blood flow and activate the hemodynamic system. So there's lots of different reasons why you do it. And we spoke, I think maybe last week, Lee, about what Ramon just said about trimming the heels off a club foot, and if it's not, then doesn't stand on the heels, then you've got a problem, because you've created a massive increase in tension in an already tense DDFT unit.
Yeah.
So there's lots of reasons.
That's what I wanted to butt in and say, is that just to warn people to be careful taking off excessive heel, because if you trim a foot and you take off a bunch of heel trying to self-level it, or level it down, you're going to cause more discomfort, and you could absolutely hurt that horse. If you trim those heels, set it down, and there's a gap under the heels, that's going to be a problem. So you need to wedge it back up. You need to do something. So I like to trim it, look at it, set it down, look at it, trim it, set it down, look at it, and make that assessment. And a lot of clients have tried to talk us into cutting all the heel off. So I know other people run that. Just be careful.
Yeah.
Definitely. So somebody's asking if it's useful for sinkers. Ramon, Lee?
Okay, this is a questionable rabbit hole. Let's do a good job of quickly answering this one and then getting back on topic.
No, I would say yes. I would say yes because many of the principles are the same. You want better load distribution. You want less leverage forces, tearing further apart your lamellar union. So I would say, in general terms, knowing the term sinker is very wide. I think yes, the principles work similarly. Yes.
And somebody's asked, Levi's asked, when using. Oh,
Hold
sorry.
on,
Sorry.
let me jump on this one real quick. Okay, so just so everybody knows when you're talking about founder, that means the coffin bone is rotating down. When you're talking about a sinker, that means it's literally sinking. And typically it's more medially. Would you agree, Ramon?
Many times, yes, because of conformation, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we were at the American Farriers Association National Conference last week, and Dr. Sammy Pittman is a good friend of mine, and a couple guys did 2 theses on ground reaction forces, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing. But they were talking about uh, wedges, either like a side bone shoe, medial or lateral, right? And Dr. Sammy actually said that on a medial sinker, that he will actually lower it on the sinking side, which is polar opposite. But his point is that the collateral cartilage would then engage and would hold it from sinking any lower. It was absolutely nuts. So not going any more into that, but just saying, when you start dealing with this stuff, you better know what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe he's just trying like to push the center of pressure towards the more loaded side.
Exactly
Yeah.
what he's doing. That was his point.
Yeah. So shall I go on to the next question? Levi has asked, when using rockers on a low foot with crushed heels and a prolapsed frog, have you been able to grow heel and a healthier back half of the foot, or do you use the rocker just to maintain phalangeal alignment?
Both, in my opinion. I've had both. I've had horses that have combined their actual that the result of their actual conformation is a combination of genetics and improper management. And I've had many of these horses improve their caudal hoof, and I get better palmar angles every time as we shoe. Of course, we are loading that frog with frog support pads, and impression material, and making sure we recruit all the load sharing that we can, and that the horse can receive, and many we have improved. I have some cases that I wish I could show you, but really interesting, where you can see the improvement on the digital cushion and on the caudal areas. And I've had some others that I just use it for maintenance, because I guess there's more of a genetic predisposition to these poor feet. That happens a lot with our horses, or just older horses that have more problems really growing. And sometimes I've used the rockers just to maintain a good positioning, but I'm not getting any improvement between one shoeing cycle and the other.
What about you, Lee? Did you get results on that hind that you showed us? Did you get heel growth? And
Oh, for sure. Just so you know, on that hind, I actually did a case study on that horse. I've shot that horse every way possible. And here would be my take home, Levi. If you've got crushed heels, if you've got a problem at the back half of the foot, you have got to unload that. I always think of a crushed heel as like a paper cup, like a coffee cup. If you start pushing down on it, it's just going to crush more. And that's why I really dislike open heeled wedges without frog support. So, however you can get relief to the back half of the foot is a good way to do it. Rockers with no pad are a great way to do it if the frog can't handle frog pressure. But my typical go-to would be some sort of frog support with a pad or a bar. Heels like pads better than bar shoes, just so you know. And floating that heel and giving it a chance to heal up, ultimately adding mechanics on the rest of the foot, taking the lever arm off the toe, and just like Yogi and I talked, I think on our first one or second one, maybe second one, I think, ultimately rebuilding the back half of the foot and then grow out of it would be the goal. So I don't care how you do it, but you're going to have to unload it.
yeah, I think the rocker shoe is going to very much mimic the shoeing around center of rotation with a flat shoe in terms of the redistribution of ground reaction forces. So you're going to have less ground reaction forces acting at the caudal aspect of the foot, which allows those tissues to have a little bit less stress going on. So yeah, and I've certainly seen with my rocker shoes that the foot tends to just lay down more mass in general. I don't know if that's something that you've both noticed as well.
Yeah. Yogi, can you
Yeah.
jump to my next slide? Maybe we can talk. It helps talk about this a little bit.
Yeah.
So this is a mare I saw, and she had a chronic subclinical laminitic from endocrinopathic origin, and this mare was relatively sore sometimes, but she was getting this white line disease, this weak white line area, and unfortunately, many of the farriers that work in Costa Rica, although there's many of them that are making a good effort in trying to improve their knowledge and to work better. Many times we get this idea of isolating the hoof capsule from whatever's inside, so it's a little bit burnt, but this shoe, what was set, as you can see in the left, really way forward, and it was there's a lot of forward migration in this foot because of the conformation and also the chronic laminitis. And what I'm showing you right next is just how I applied the rocker after having this shoe like this, and how you can better see how you can see a much better distribution of forces there, and how that toe ends up sticking out of the front, but it's really it has to be out of my picture in this kind of scenario, because like Yogi said, all these biomechanical environment of central rotation lever arms, it is of course underneath the distal interphalangeal joint, and not all the time around the hoof capsule itself.
Good job right there, Ramon.
Yeah. And then maybe you want to do next, Yogi?
Yeah, go.
Yeah, that's also a nice case that we did in Italy with when I went to do our presentation in Rockers there, and as you can see, they were a little bit concerned on the picture on the right, because this horse immediately he wanted to roll forward, much more than the other, which means that he's probably he's been having more strain, higher flexor demand. That was his high foot, and he was hoping to get the chance to physically reduce that extensor lever arm by rolling forward, and the rocker shoe allowed him, and that's how he was standing day one. But interestingly, a couple of days later, he relaxed a little bit. Things started to get into his place, and he started. It was a school horse in a in the equestrian center where my good friend Carlo Montagna from Italy works, and they've telling me that this horse liked the rocker so much that they've kept him on rockers ever since, which is quite interesting, and something that I do if I have a low foot with a little bit of a sore frog, is that I use leather pads with my rockers, and I love them. I think it gives me a great response. It's like a passive soft support, and also protection and sole stimulation. It's great, man. I love this setup, and I use it often. And maybe next one. Yep, that's the last one. This is just interesting. Like Yogi said, our ultimate goal when using the rocker shoes therapeutically is to create or enhance a healing environment in the foot, where blood perfusion is reestablished, where there are no external forces that can affect or create pressure or the ability of blood to reach everywhere, and we get that by good load distribution, by shorter breakover, by shorter leverage, and better overall morphology. And this is just normally what we get between shoeing cycles, even in very compromised feet, where we get very uniform growth. As you can see, both the toe and the heels grew kind of in a uniform way in a laminitic horse, which is what we really want. What happens very many times if we keep using flat shoes on these laminitic horses that are not completely recovered is that you're always going to get this excessive heel growth and very little toe growth, just because of the low distribution and where that perfusion is getting in the sole. And this is where the rocker shoe has allowed me to help a ton of horses, hopefully. And yeah, at the end, that's what makes us happy. That's what we're passionate about.
Definitely. And also we've talked about, so this is an important concept to understand. We've talked about the lowest mechanical environment for, the tendons and those kind of things. But it's not just the tendons, right? It's a lower mechanical environment for the entire myofascial, biotensegral, vascular, nervous environment of the foot. So when you have the lowest energy cost state, all of the systems are at their lowest energy cost. So the vascular system, the nervous system, lymphatic system, everything. So everything, so because we know that when we have an increased DDFT tension, then we have that DDFT compressing vascular structures, for instance. So
Exactly.
when we're creating this lowest cost energy state for the tendons and ligaments, that then extrapolates to the other systems, the vascular system and blah, blah, blah. So that's the whole system can heal. So we see it work across all of the different systems. So that's the power of the therapeutic application of the lowest system energy state. So Bobby Joe Lieberman has asked, how do the mechanics of the rocker type shoe compare with the clog? So the clog would be very similar to the timeline shoe in terms of mechanics. I don't know if you were here for that. The clog obviously doesn't have a belly, so it has a flat midsection. So the angle that you create with the clog is a set angle, whereas with the equilibrium shoe, the banana shoe, the digit is allowed to find its own equilibrium. So that's the difference that I would say. If anyone else wants to comment on the difference between the clog and the rocker.
Well, I think the clog. I think the clog does similar, like you said. It is important if you're going to apply a clog to keep in mind some of the same principles that we have talked about. You cannot place a clog if you don't trim properly, because then you're not doing much. You have to reduce your heel height and derotate and distribute the load better within the foot. And in the clog, you also have to have a certain degree of wedge so that you maintain the ground palmar angle high enough as not to exacerbate the tendon pull over affected lamellar interface. And in the clog, either you buy a clog from Dr. Stewart with the foam underneath that sort of deforms to help find a placement, or if you're going to use the your own clogs that you make, you're going to have to grind them to provide the breakover where it needs to go. So something I don't agree on the clog in general terms is for people to say, oh, just put a clog on it and it will be okay. It needs to be correctly put a clog on it and it is going to be okay. But it's just like everything else, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, application is always is the test of efficacy for anything that you apply to the hoof. So some of the other things for a clog, which would be slightly different from the rocker, is that the base of the clog is supposed to frame the distal phalanx, right? So and the breakover point would be underneath the tip of P3. So slightly different mechanics there. So you're with the breakover being under the tip of P3 is a similar mechanics in the fact that you're trying to create the easiest ambulation as possible. So allow movement without any DDFT tension. So that that's why the breakover is under the tip of P3. But so the main difference I would say though is that the clog has a flat base, although it frames the distal phalanx, it is flat. So the angle you create is set. So it's not the foot, the digit is not able to find its own equilibrium in that sense. But there are many things about them that are the same.
I love your guys' input so much. I agree with it. Everything I agree with. I would just say that I don't like clogs personally, and there's a lot of prevalence in our industry to say, the vet said to put a freedom plate on them. Well, to me, that just says the vet has no knowledge of your skills, or if you have a better way to do it. I dislike the clogs because you have to take the foot to the clog at some point, and I am not a fan of that at all. I think it is a great tool for a veterinarian that's not a farrier. They can tape them on, they can cast them on. It is a great way to add a lot of depth that has some breakover built in until you can get it shod correctly. So I think it has its place, but I do find it an annoyance sometimes, majority of the time.
Yeah. I mean, I have had some good results with clogs, I have to say, but because they do allow you to provide plenty of support across the whole solar surface, again creating that ability for ambulation. But as Ramon said, how you apply the clog is absolutely critical, and how you trim in preparation for the clog is absolutely critical. So this is always the problem with people asking about what shoe would you use.
Yeah.
Because it's not about the shoe, it's about the whole application trim process and everything like that. So it's very much depends.
Hey Ramon, do you know Blaine Chapman?
Yes.
He is.
Yes.
I don't think
You introduced me to him. I haven't talked a lot about him. I've followed him and I admire him. And you introduced him to me in the airport in Dallas Fort Worth a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he's one of my best buddies, but his dad was Bernie Chapman, who was huge in laminitis, right?
Yeah.
But he has a saying that just nails everything on here. He said, "I haven't seen a single horseshoe cripple a horse ever." He said it's application every time.
Yeah, absolutely. So Gia van Boxtel, I hope I haven't butchered your name, sorry. How do you decide how many degrees you wedge? Because sometimes I see you using 2 wedge pads, sometimes 1. How do you decide on how much wedge you're gonna apply?
Well, it depends on what type of case I'm working on. If it's a laminated case with a bunch of rotation, I'm very probably gonna need higher wedge, or maybe I even stock up 2 wedges at a time. What I normally do is based on my radiological evaluation. I start maybe 1 wedge and maybe 3 or 5 degrees, and I place my shoe with 1 nail and I take a radiograph. And that way I know if I'm getting the palmar angle I need, and if I'm getting the rotation and good and better load distribution. Many times, especially in a laminated foot, I want to make sure that I have a high PA, the same or even higher from what I've started with. So those are the horses that many times I take the shoe off, add another pad, and then I'll do better. And sometimes in my low feet, also depending after my trim, how much wedging I'm going to need to help them get into alignment. But the interesting thing about this part is that if you were gonna shoe flat, you would need a much higher wedge in the low feet than if you put a little bit of mechanics and the wedge. Just because the mechanics and the roll forward ability is going to help improve your PA, and you're not exclusively depending on the size of your wedge. If you understand what I mean.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So another question: are there any positive effects that the rocker shoe can bring to a horse with extensive side bone in both fronts? Have we used it in side bone?
I think I'm going to let Ramon dive in on.
Well,
From my standpoint, is that when I think of side bone, I think of this tire.
We lost you there, Lee. Ramon, do you want to go while we're waiting for Lee to come back?
Well, yeah, I think it works in side bone as well. Everything that could help the foot find its equilibrium, it's gonna work. The different pathologies and conditions, maybe the side bone could be a little bit caused by maybe strong chronic heel landing that is causing trauma on the soft tissue structures in the back part of the foot. So definitely the rocker shoe or rockering the heels and the toe a little bit, that is going to create a much smoother heel landing and better biomechanics throughout the stance phase. But also I've used in side bone shoes not only dorsopalmar or caudal and forward movement, but sometimes like a salad bowl or more omnidirectional breakover. I also think that helps them a lot.
So Ramon just said what I was pretty much going to say, that I think it can definitely help with side bone, because if you think of side bone as it's a concussive issue for the most part, and you have that initial impact concussion. So if you can that's why I brought this slide back up, to show that if we can get that first impact to be smoother and roll into mid stance, then I can see that definitely being something helpful for side bone. So I completely agree with Ramon there. Lee, we lost you for a second. So did you want to carry on what you were saying?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that I know you guys were about to nail it. I was just going to say, if you focus your time on figuring out what's causing the side bone, then you got a chance to help it. In my opinion, it's normally a medial lateral imbalance, landing, crooked leg, angular, rotational limb deformity, something. So you figure that out. Unless it's bilateral, meaning both sides on the same foot, then you probably do have a just purely concussive issue, which is a whole nother mess. But
yeah, absolutely. It depends if it's purely a concussive impact issue or if it's a medial lateral balance issue. So yeah, absolutely, completely agree with that. So on the medial lateral, Levi's asking, how do you apply your rockers and deviated limbs that don't break over straight, and feet with crushed medial aspects or medial heels, etc.? How do you address those distortions with your rocker shoes?
Well, when you have these kinds of distortions, it's gonna pose a problem no matter what you do. Rocker shoes, flat shoes, whatever you want to do. So I always try to do my applications the best possible, to leave some support on the medial side if I need it, and to try and see where my foot is breaking, to see if I can maybe grind a little bit more of the shoe towards the side that is breaking. Little things, but in general terms, it's the same as in any other application. You're gonna have to struggle with these cases that are hard to manage. And I'm not one to try to do anything aggressive to these feet, but just try to go with the flow with them.
Yep. I mean, the only thing that I would add is I tend to focus on the most glaringly obvious problem at the time. So
Yeah.
if we have a serious medial lateral issue, and this is a little bit similar. I don't know, Ramon, if you remember the case that I shot at the Rood and Riddle conference.
I remember.
Yeah, and it was like a bulldog, like this. Though the right fore was almost facing the near fore,
Yeah.
and for me, the biggest issue at that point was medial lateral balance, and so that was what I focused on, and so I ended up shoeing it with quite a large lateral extension to bring that limb out and to get it landing and loading level as it was working on the soft surfaces. So for me, it really you have to match your intervention to whatever the problem is at that point in time, and
Yeah.
that helps you to decide, am I using a rocker in this instance, or am I using something that enables me to create more aggressive medial lateral balance corrections. So you always have to match your shoeing job to the issue that's in front of you. I'm sure you would definitely agree with that.
I would agree, and I would just say in short, just remember a rocker is just another tool in the bag. So you got to think about what that horse needs. This is not a rocker promo. This is just diving into some great uses for them. And what great questions everybody has had. You guys make this a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant.
Guys, I almost have to go because I have a meeting at noon
Yeah,
in
that's
Costa
fine.
Rica. So I don't know if there's any other questions for me.
There is yeah. Just answer this one and then take off. But Ramon, I got to tell you, I love your for being a part of this. The last question
Yeah.
is, could you touch on how a rocker shoe may help or hurt a horse that already has a toe first landing? You go and then we'll go and you could take off.
Well, that's a good question. I'd like to, from a veterinary standpoint, address what's causing the toe first landing first. Maybe do a clinical exam and see if there's something that needs to be treated, or you
Yeah.
know first of all go towards gravitate towards that, and then I believe that a well placed rocker shoe with a level of mechanics that the case requires due to its pathology or to its need for use, then that it could be helpful depending on
Yeah.
what we're talking about. Yeah.
I would completely agree with that. And what I would say is that a toe first landing is usually a compensation for caudal hoof pain of some kind, because the
Yeah.
horse doesn't want to land on its heels. So therefore, actually, the rocker shoe, if it allows that initial impact to be much smoother, and it's creating a better PA during mid stance, those kind of things, the horse may actually stop landing toe first, because the whole point of a horse landing toe first is it's not comfortable. It's not a normal landing pattern, right? Horses don't land toe first. That's not a normal. So it's a pathological landing pattern. So as Ramon has correctly said, we first need to work out why it's landing toe first. Usually it's landing toe first because it's uncomfortable to land heel first. So potentially creating the rocker shoe could take away the reason for wanting to land toe first. But that's something that you'd have to assess on the day, right? You'd have to work it out on the day and see whether applying the rocker shoe, removing the pain from the caudal hoof would stop the toe first landing. So that would have to be an assessment on the
My,
day.
my practical input on this is one of my favorite sayings that if a horse is landing toe first and isn't lame, it's gonna be.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'd spend more time figuring out why the heels are sore, and I think the rocker could absolutely help. But Cash said, "Thank you, Ramon." So everybody say thank you, Ramon. Have a great day.
Yeah, thank you, Ramon, so
So,
much.
so guys, before I go, I just wanted to thank you both for just inviting me and giving me this chance to talk about all this stuff. I'm passionate. I love it. Um, this has helped me a lot. So if I can somehow pass a little bit of my experience to help other guys that as me struggle with difficult cases, and if I can help someone, I'm very happy with that. I admire you both, so that's why I feel very honored to be here, and hope we do it again. And thank you very much to everyone for taking their time to listen to us today.
Thank you, Ramon. And if anyone doesn't follow Ramon, then you definitely should, because he's someone that definitely an inspiration to me anyway. So thank you very much, Ramon. And
Yeah.
Thank you.
We
Same
we
to you
all
both.
we all, including my wife, can't wait for that clinic in Costa Rica.
Great, great. See you guys
See
soon. Have a good one.
you
Thank
later,
you.
man. Bye bye, man. Brilliant. So yeah, absolutely wonderful to have Ramon with us. That was a treat. Have you guys got any more questions for Lee and myself? We've been going for nearly 2 hours now, so
right. Let's let's wrap this up. But we do have one question that actually ties into one thing that I just wanted to talk about before we get done, and it was if you got any final questions, kick them in here. But also, what would you guys like to hear next time?
yes, we
Well, I
need
think
to ask
a
that
great.
question. So, yeah, definitely. Any subjects that you want us to cover, let us know.
Yeah, and you can also comment on our individual posts on the Equine Documentalist or Olsen Equine CJF. So either one,
Yeah.
but live is always better. So here's a question. Ryan says, "How do mechanics affect the function of the hind end when applied behind?" So he's asking about how does a rocker work on the hind end. That was one thing I wanted to talk about. We spent, with the exception of me with that one case, we spent the whole time talking about rockers on the front feet. Let's just quickly dive into the hind feet, and then people can post what they want to hear next time, and then we'll be done.
Well, it's a really interesting question because the hind end biomechanics are not the same, right? So the front foot tends to land and then roll through, whereas the hind end is much more propulsive in its action. So it's actually a very interesting question to ask whether or not it affects the natural function of the hind hoof. But I think the point is, though, is that you wouldn't put it on unless you had a serious therapeutic case that you were dealing with, right? So let's go back to what the reason that Lee put it on was obviously this seriously negative plantar angle. So when you're dealing with a seriously negative plantar angle, you are now in a rehabilitation mode, and the optimum biomechanics of the hind hoof perhaps don't apply. But it's a really good question because it would, it could, may well affect the propulsive job of the hind foot. It was an interesting question because that with the toe, but at the same time, the shoe is mimicking the natural landing, loading, and propulsion phase. So it's actually a very interesting question, and I'm not actually sure that anybody's researched it. But have you got any anecdotal evidence on it, Lee?
So I think that the simple take home is that differentiating the difference between the front and the hind. Okay. So the front does the turning, the back does the driving. Okay. So breakover is not important on the hind feet. I mean, yes, you need a well maintained hoof capsule, gathered, collected, so everything works right. I always say if you get it where God meant it to be, everything's going to be fine. So if you look at the top right picture of this, that is not good. That horse is going to break himself. You just think about the deep flexor tendon, how it rolls around the back and plugs in the bottom of the coffin bone. Like there's a lot of strain on that. So this horse is actually cowhocked and puts a lot of strain on his lateral heel. And he ultimately broke himself. So you got to get him positive. And that's where a rocker shoe on the hind feet, I think, is really helpful because you can trim what you can rocker the rest of it. You can pair a wedge pad like the bottom left. On the bottom right was, like I said, when I got this horse lined out a little better, but like Yogi and I have talked before, we had a healthier back half of the foot. So knowing it was going to come back, we welded that was aluminum wedge that was rockered up, that was welded a bar in the back just for support to prevent overloading the lateral side. But my biggest thing with this is I reached out to Dr. Sammy Pittman. This was years ago. And I was like, hey, what do I got to do for this rocker on a hind foot. So he tells me. But then I ultimately tried to put a square peg in a round hole, and I didn't adjust my trim correctly, and that's where the wedge pads will make it conforming. And this horse was sore. So anytime you're putting frog plates on, like a heart bar, or anytime you're rockering, reading that horse and how he likes it is huge. So I would just say pay attention to that your trim reflects it. If not, you got to use the pad. But the biggest take home for me is where the rocker needs to happen is so far back compared to the front feet, like fourth nail hole, end of the wings of the coffin bone, whatever you want to call it. But it's always farther back than I think. What do you think, Yogi?
Yeah, well, we know proportionally the hind feet don't have the same proportions as the front feet anyway. But actually, if you look at the top right image where you have the negative plantar angles, if you remember, you need to get your belly underneath the center of rotation. Well, look how far back, look how far back in that foot the center of rotation is. Right, it's almost 3/4 of the way back. So that's showing exactly what you said, that you had to get the belly right back, but almost behind the wings of P3 in order to actually get it in the right place underneath the center of rotation. So that's where that's coming in. So hopefully, Ryan, we answered your question there. I think the point is it may, we don't have the science on it, it may affect the function of the hind end. But what's important in a case like this is, as Lee said, you've got to get it positive, and you've got to get it into a situation where it's going to start healing and improving its morphology. So that at this point in time, that trumps any loss in propulsion or anything like that. So that's what I would say on that. Hopefully that answers your question, Ryan. So shall we wrap up there, Lee?
Yeah, let's call it a day.
We haven't got anything on what to do next time, but hopefully we'll get some comments. You guys are obviously free to message us through our platforms as well, and just let us know what you want us to talk about next time.
Yep, sounds good. Thanks everybody for getting on, and see you next time.
Have a safe drive, Lee.
Will do.
Oh, and God bless America.
And God bless everybody.
See you later, my man.
See ya.